Howdy bars, it's so good to be here again to talk about film. And what an exciting day for cinema it is. One Battle After Another is without question one of the most exciting and anticipated films of the year. It is the latest film written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, though from what I understand, even though it is an original screenplay, it is inspired by a Thomas Pynchon novel called Vineland, and this is actually his 10th feature film. I won't go over in detail over his whole filmography because that is a video on its own, but let it be known that he is one of the great modern American filmmakers, and he has quite a few classics under his belt. There Will Be Blood in particular is truly one of my all-time favorite films. In any case, his latest film is his biggest and most epic film, also his most expensive one. Usually he's been making relatively low-budget indie films, whereas One Battle After Another has a whopping $130 million budget. On the low end, it might be ranging up to $175 million for all we know. So I do hope it manages to cover the cost at the box office. And I think there's quite a lot of reasons for folks to go running to the cinema to go check it out on the big screen. For one, it's a genuinely surprising and exciting film journey. The trailer, as exciting as it was, doesn't actually reveal most of the film and its deeper topics, which is a refreshing take in our modern era of film trailers that pretty much give away the entire narrative arc of a film. That is definitely not the case here. And let me tell you, One Battle After Another tackles a lot, even in its whopping nearly 3-hour runtime. And it ends up bringing a lot of unexpected tonal shifts. Of course, I won't spoil the plot for you, as always, but I'll go over the essence of the story. We follow the members of this revolutionary group known as the French 75, who at the start of the film are rescuing these immigrants from these detention centers. Sounds familiar? I'm sure it does in our modern times. And perhaps the film doesn't specifically tell us when it's happening, but it does feel distinctly modern, especially as far as Paul Thomas Anderson films go. In any case, outside of those events, we see them causing quite a lot of mayhem and chaos. I'll let you discover what those events are. But they're not exactly your perfect good guys, and there is this kind of moral dilemma in that regard. And I imagine that this part of the film on its own will be quite divisive and controversial for a lot of folks. In any case, two of the members of this group end up forming a relationship and they have a baby together. I'll let you discover all the relationship details for yourselves, but soon enough we end up having a time skip 16 years later into the future, where the consequences of all these characters and their past deeds end up coming back to haunt them. Personally, I genuinely love the evolution of all these characters. And what an incredible cast we have to tackle all these complex personalities. Let's start with the women. Chase Infinity is playing the daughter, who has remarkable screen energy and who is called to bring not just a lot of emotion, but also has a lot of physical prowess to demonstrate on screen in order to fight for her life and also to show off some martial arts skills. And I didn't actually know this going into the film, but this is her first time acting in any film. Could have fooled me, she's that good. Then we have Teyana Taylor, who plays her mother, who has such a power on screen. She has this incredibly dominating and commanding screen presence. She's a little intimidating, to be honest, and kinda hot too in a really unexpected way. Truly a tour de force performance. And then we have Leonardo DiCaprio playing the main character, who as always in his acting career is consistently brilliant, and I do love that at this late stage of his acting career, rather than going for these perfect golden boy characters that he had in Titanic or The Great Gatsby, he's chasing these really odd, dangerous, and experimental roles for him as an actor. And he perfectly fits this washed up ex-revolutionary transformed into a dad. Let's be honest, his character is a bit of a stoner bum, but this is genuinely the funniest Leonardo has been since perhaps The Wolf of Wall Street. And then there's Sean Penn, who I think he's pretty much locked in for a third Oscar win. This time would be for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, his character is just so strange. Definitely the most colorful of this eccentric bunch. He's not just dangerous and terrifying as a villain, which he totally is. He echoes the military tyranny of a police force gone rogue, but there are contradictions in his soul that make him become such a fascinating character. And I do love all his facial expressions and the range of emotions he gets to express. He even has a decent amount of comedy as well, all things considered. Which, FYI, the film can be genuinely funny at times. In a really strange, dark way, mind you. And on top of that, the film is also super exciting to watch. Around the midpoint, there's this incredible long take sequence, which is roughly around 20 minutes long. I'm not saying it's all done in one shot, but even if it isn't, it's an incredible feat of orchestrating this chaos and this rioting crowd, where we also transition through several locations, from exterior to interior to back outside again. There's even a rooftop parkour sequence, which I thought was a lot of fun. And all that chaos is perfectly accentuated by a splendid soundtrack from none other than Johnny Greenwood, who, if you didn't know, is the guitarist for Radiohead, and he's been collaborating with Paul Thomas Anderson for pretty much all his films since There Will Be Blood. And there is a lot of elements in this film that I feel echo that kind of soundtrack he built in There Will Be Blood. There's this pulsing rhythmic piano paired with these percussive elements that create this really off-kilter vibe that I think perfectly suits the needs of that scene. It really does wonders to enhance that tone. In fact, top to bottom, this is just one of the best and most original and creative soundtracks you'll hear in any film this year. Honestly, this film is a bit of a masterclass in juggling these wide tonal shifts in a film. Even for a film that's slowly getting to the 3-hour-long mark, there's a lot of topics explored here. We have revolution, family drama, bit of a military thriller, where we also explore these kind of cultish conspiracies with these wild power dynamics. There's a lot of comedy and a decent amount of action too. There's a particularly noteworthy and riveting car chase sequence in the film, which it features this very novel and dynamic camera perspective that I don't recall seeing in another film. Just wow. Might cause a little bit of motion sickness for some folks, I grant you that, but personally I thought it was a brilliant idea. Especially at that stage of the film where it really did feel like we were going for a roller coaster ride in more ways than one. It's crazy how the film's title, One Battle After Another, really does mirror itself in the film because there's just always one thing after another happening. It kind of leaves you breathless. And speaking of the cinematography, I think this film is beautifully shot. There's a surprising amount of range in the color palette and locations, and I equally love the set design, which is intricately crafted as much as any other element in this film. It's just a beautiful and exciting film to watch. Now, as much as I do love this film, I don't think all the pieces quite fit together quite so smoothly. I mean, like I did mention, there's a lot that's going into this film. So it is kind of a miracle that all the pieces fit in as well as they do. Perhaps some of the side characters don't have quite as much meat on their bones, but I think one of the elements that worked least is the film's ending, which didn't quite stick the landing for me. For pretty much the whole film, I thought it was rock solid, but I do think it kind of loses its laser focus by the end. And I struggled to express my feelings on this next point, and this is something that I imagine might change over time with some personal reflection and discussions among friends, but I generally struggle to see how the whole revolution narrative arc fits in the big picture, morally speaking, for the characters' perspectives. It feels distinctly undefined and unresolved. Perhaps yet another way that the film's title, One Battle After Another, fits over here, where it feels like it just never ends and there's always going to be some other problem on the horizon. I do genuinely love how the film's title works on several layers. But even with that thought, there's no denying that this is one hell of a film. I was intrigued, shocked, emotionally moved, and genuinely riveted to my seat from beginning to end. This is the kind of film that will leave you breathless with just how wild and ambitious it is. It might not be Paul Thomas Anderson's best film ever, which mind you is a very, very high bar to cross, but this is nonetheless excellent and a defining moment in 2025 cinema, which is why I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Go to the cinema, let's see Paul Thomas Anderson's first big picture absolutely smash out of the box office. It totally deserves it. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.